Welcome back to the Step It Up Entrepreneur Podcast. Your host, Tomas Keenan, coming at you guys today we're in a home office today. I flip-flop between the home office and going to the office and doing these. And there's no kids at home right now, so it's quiet. It's very peaceful in here. It's almost eerie because there's no one around. And I say that because between myself and my woman, we've got 7 kids. And 50% of the time my kids are here, 50% of the time they're with their mom, but we always have at least 4 kids here. And there's no one in the house right now except for me and 2 cats, and the cats hide upstairs all day. So it is almost surreal being here, having this conversation, or about to have an amazing conversation with my man, Andrew Biernat. And before I introduce you, sir, and let you open your mouth, because I know you love to speak and you come with the high energy, we've got to give a shout out to Mr. Eli Delaney, colleague of both of ours. I met Eli almost a year ago here in the Dallas area at a local networking event, and him and I hit it off real quick, real fast. We're both nerds who like technology and help clients and customers with technology a lot. So we talked about a lot of that stuff, and connecting with him, having some conversations with him, because I'm the kind of person where I like to check in on my people occasionally. It's just a random text message, dude, you good? And it kicks off conversation like, oh shit, you know what? I've been meaning to reach out to you. I got someone you need to meet. And my recent interaction with Eli led us to connecting, myself and Andrew here. And he sent us, I think he connected us on LinkedIn or something. We got on a call, we chatted, we shot the shit, and immediately was like, all right, yeah, cool. This he's the real deal. Let me get on his podcast and we'll do some cool things. And dude, I think that was 3 weeks ago at this point that we recorded. And I got done with your podcast episode. I was like, you know what? I thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. Andrew's got a lot of value. He's got a lot of insight. He's a hard charging, high driven, high energy individual. And I think he'd be a great guest for the show. So with all that being said, sir, welcome to the Step It Up Entrepreneur Podcast. I'm excited as all hell to have you here, because I know my energy is already raised today because you're here and I know what you bring. So I'm trying to keep up. Welcome.
I love it. Thomas, thank you so much for having me on today. What you just shared, that story about Eli, he literally shared that same exact advice when I had him on my show. I was like, I usually end with something like, hey, if you could share one last piece of advice with the audience, what do you want to share?
Yeah.
And he said, I want you, for those listening, I want you to go look through your contacts, look through the people you've been messaging the past 30, 60, 90 days.
Mm-hmm.
Find some of those people on there, make a list, and just call them. And you say, hey, how are you? How you doing?
Yep.
And like, that was it. That was his insight. That was the last thing that he shared on the show. And I actually just shared that on my LinkedIn profile today as a form of content, because it's such a powerful thing to do. Just that little ping, that little, hey, how are you? And it's just really cool that was kind of how we got connected, was that actually initial idea. And that was kind of his closing thought for the show too.
Yeah. I mean, look, that just goes to show you there's alignment between me and him, because we think and operate in the same ways. And we noticed that within the first 5 or so minutes that we started interacting with each other, which is pretty cool. Take it a step further. One thing that I always recommend to my clients, and I try to do this too, is, I know this is probably the case for what you do in your line of work, and we'll get into what you do here in a second. But for me in the coaching consulting space, I don't always work with clients for multiple years. Some clients come in for a very specific project, like, hey, I need to create core values for my company. Cool. That's going to take us maybe 90 days in total between creating them and implementing them to the company. So it's a shorter term project. I've got some clients who come in and work with us for 6 months. They get what they need and they're good to go. Awesome. And then I have the clients who come in that are much more long term. I tell you all that because just because someone is not currently your client right now and they were in the past doesn't mean that they're an asshole, doesn't mean that they're a bad person, doesn't mean that they didn't enjoy or appreciate the services that you gave or offered. Now, granted, some of those things may be true, right? And this is for you to decide, but reach out to your past clients as well and check in on them as human beings. It's like one of the first things that happens with my clients who I work with, and especially my one-to-one coaching clients, they come in and we have our first initial onboarding call. And I tell them out of the gate, I'm like, look, you just signed up and paid a bunch of money to work with me. And there's one thing you got to know out of the gate when it comes to me, the human being. Before we talk business, I'm always going to check in on you as a person. I have to make sure that you're good there, because if you're not good on the personal realm, the business shit doesn't make a difference right now. And the conversations that I wind up having, the doors that open up because of this, the trust that is built between myself and the client is at an exponential rate because I truly care about them as a human being. And over the years, I wind up having some really deep conversations with clients, sometimes not clients either. You find a human being that's in need, and you may have something that you can offer to help them out of their situation. For me personally, it's not always about the money. And I think that's a really important piece that a lot of people in the business space, in the human being space, are missing out on today.
Man, I couldn't agree more. I feel like if you can connect with people on that personal level and you let them know that you care, that makes all the difference in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And I can remember back when I used to be a personal trainer, I did that for about 10 years. And just like you were saying, if someone is not having a good time personally, like the rest of their goals, the rest of their stuff that they're working on, like who cares? Like if they're in the middle of a divorce or they might get laid off from their job, or like, there's something else bigger looming over them or that they're in the midst in, right? They've got a parent that's got some sort of issue, or they've just found out about a health issue that they have, right? Like everything else stops, like literally nothing else matters to them. And they're just going to go through the motions. And so like, don't go through the motions with people. Like, let's be real. Let's connect. And if I can help you in those moments, I'm going to try and help. At the very least, I'm going to empathize. I'm going to be there with you in it. Sometimes it's all people need is just to know that you hear them and know that you're there. And sometimes it's better to like, cool, why don't we just put our coaching on pause for a minute? Like, hey, why don't we just go through and just do some basic personal training for a bit? Or why don't you just like, let's not focus on improving. Let's just get you here every day. Like that's your goal this month, is just to show up to your workouts. I don't care about a PR. I don't care about you losing any weight. I don't care about any of that. I just want you here. Just get in the environment and do that. And that's a win. And so I love that you do that with your clients.
Yeah. So much power in that. It's like the days, and listen, man, from my days in the gym, and I'm still active in the gym now, I've learned some of my biggest business lessons under the bar. And it's so important, is the consistency is more important than anything else. So even to this day, like I have days I'm like, I want to go to the fucking gym. Like, come on. Like, who thoroughly enjoys working out? Like when you're there and you're in it, all right, it's different, but it's like, oh, I got to dress. I got to wake up early, or I got to go after this. I got to find time for this. I'm going to get sweaty. We come up with all these bullshit excuses, right? But it's the consistency added or connected with time, consistency over time. That's what actually drives the results. So for me personally, the days that I don't want to show up are the more important days for me to show up. And I also tell you this little secret sauce here for those people listening. Every PR that I've ever set for myself has been on a day where I fought myself to go to the gym. Like, fuck this. I don't want to do it. The gym can go eat my ass. Like all this stuff's running through my head. I don't feel good. My back's tight. Something's wrong with the hip. My right knee hurts today. Every time I've given myself one of those bullshit excuses, I've shown up in the gym and done my best.
I love that. I love that. And I feel like that thread, that showing up consistently, is so true in almost every area of life. You can look at and apply that to family. You can look at that and apply that to content creation. You can look at that and apply that to podcasting, right? Like if you can show up and do things consistently and at least make attempts at getting better, it's remarkable what can happen. And I think you need both. I think you need to show up and at least show up with the mindset of most of the time you're going to try and do better. Because there's plenty of people that show up for their family, but not really, right? Like, maybe they're not actively trying to get better for them. And that does show up, right? And whether you think about it now or later, your family will remember that later. Your family will remember you were more disconnected, or that they didn't get as much from you as they wish they could, because you weren't actively trying to improve that way.
Yeah. So speaking of showing up, I want to kind of switch gears here and transition over a little bit to what you're doing in business, right? You do a lot of stuff, and I'll let you get into that because I don't want to butcher it. But the clients that you're working with, they have to show up consistently if they want the end result, if they want the book out, right? And I know that for myself, being a published author, is Dude, this is a project. This is a long-term deal. Whether you want to do this or not, you've already fronted the money for this. You better get your ass to work. Otherwise, you just basically took thousands upon thousands of dollars and lit it on fire and handed it to somebody else and said, here you go. Happy Christmas or Merry Christmas, whatever you want to call it. So tell me about, let's dive into what you're doing, how you're showing up, how you're helping people. And I want to hear from you the difference that you're seeing in your clients who are ultra consistent versus the ones who are like, and what the outcome is for them, especially when it comes to books.
Oof, yeah, so good. So like you alluded to, we work with people on books or courses. A good thing about it is intellectual property. And that can be your personal stories. That can be the frameworks that you have in your business. That can be some specialized research that you've done. Those things that kind of set you apart. Mm-hmm. What we try and help people with is elevating those. So making the stories more interesting, more enticing to your customers, making that intellectual property like your frameworks for the way that you consult or the way that you go in and handle things with a customer, making those stand out, maybe be a little bit more snappy, a little bit more catchy, a little bit more memorable. And what we do is we then put all of those things together, many stories, many frameworks, many other ideas that make you special and make you and your business different. And then we put it into something bigger. We make a book out of that, or we'll make a course out of that, or a keynote or some sort of training. And so the business here is intellectual property and leveling up the way that you do things. And you mentioned the idea of consistency is the people that are showing up and doing that well versus the people that aren't showing up and aren't doing that well. And sometimes it's a very fine line. It's a very subtle difference. So I'll share a story of a lady I'm working with. And so she's in a spot right now where she's kind of like discovering what her book is. And she's like getting different bits of advice from different people. Mm-hmm. And so she hasn't really been showing up super consistently. She paid us, kind of like you were talking about, right? Mm-hmm. We've been paid. But for me, honestly, I'm not even happy. I'm frustrated because like, I want to help you get your book done. Like, let's get this thing moving. And she's been kind of stuck in this mode of getting almost too much advice or conflicting advice from trusted advisors. And it's paralyzed her. And she's a high performer. She's a real estate agent, absolutely slaying it as a real estate agent. But in this other area, she's gotten stuck. And I feel like a lot of people can relate to that. It's like you may be killing it in one area, but then somewhere else you're not getting what you need. And it was really helpful. I've had a couple more phone calls with her. So I was calling her and talking to her like once a month. And I was like, you know what, let's just talk every single week. I don't care if you've made any progress. Like, I just need to get a pulse on what's going on here because you're not getting the results that you want. And so we had a good discussion, good second discussion. By our third discussion, she finally had realized that one of her trusted advisors that was kind of talking to her about the book had recommended that she write the book for a different audience. They recommended that she write the book for people that are serving home buyers. So people that are loan officers or people that are real estate agents or other people that kind of serve that market. And it's easier to sell large quantities of books to that market because you can go to trade shows or conventions or other things, right? And you can sell big lumps of them. But she didn't have the heart for them, at least not right now. She had the heart for the consumer. The book was aimed at people that are buying houses for reasons that they shouldn't, or they're looking for things in their houses that aren't a good match for them. And so she's like, man, I just really got a heart for that business to consumer kind of book. Mm-hmm. And so once she figured that out, she's been on fire. Yeah. And so I think some of it is if you're not seeing consistency in what you're trying to do, which I think happens in any walk of life at some point in something that you're doing, just try and figure out, is there differing advice that I'm getting, or is there something that's not resonating with me? Mm-hmm. And sometimes the best thing you can do is just literally talk it out. Is find someone, either a coach or a mentor or somebody else, somebody who's done it before, talk it out with them. And a lot of times you'll figure out like, oh, that was my stumbling block. Mm-hmm. And once that stumbling block's out of the way, you're on fire again and you're back to the races. Yeah,
I love that, man. And it's solid advice too. Take it a step further from my perspective. Clarity breeds decision. Decision breeds action. So, hearing what you said about this, she obviously had an issue with clarity, right? And she was getting information from multiple different sources, which clouds the clarity. Cool, I get it. But at the same point in time, she sounds like a high performer who wants to go and study and get input from people that are trusted. And then she's going to take all this information, run it through her little computer system up here in the brain, And then, okay, figure it out. And that's literally what it did. But I love the fact that you showed up as the mentor, the coach, the advisor, whatever title or role you want to call yourself, right? But you showed up and said, okay, obviously she's got an issue with clarity here. I'm going to ask her to show up and be present with me at least once a week so we can dive in and have conversation. And like you said, after 2 or 3 weeks, boom, it's unlocked. Move forward. Let's roll.
100%. 100%.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. Talk to me about courses. It's here's my opinion of it. And I'm a guy who's got, I don't know, 4 or 5 or 6 online courses floating out there. I don't really push or promote them crazy hard because most of them are for my clients when they sign up and come into the system. It's included with a coaching package or, this package, that package. My opinion of courses is, yes, they're very helpful and needed. Some people don't learn well from them. And I have this sense, I'm not saying that they're not useful at the moment, but I have a sense that the heyday of selling online courses and making $1 million is kind of gone. And like, that may be my skewed perspective, but I want to hear from someone like yourself who's in that game day in and day out, what you're seeing. Are online courses something that's still valuable that someone can go in there? Because here's the problem too that I see. A lot of people are like, oh, I'll just go get Kajabi, or I'll go get this online course software. I'll go get a school account. And then they try to do the online course themselves and they realize, oh my God, I had no idea it was this much work. And they put together a dog shit course and it does nothing for them, because that's the other side of the spectrum. But what are you guys seeing? What's the differentiator between self-publishing a course or self-building an online course versus using a company like yours to help put together the course and craft it? And I'm assuming you guys help market it too, or can give some direction there. Give me some insight into what you're seeing and how you're serving clients in that area.
Great question. So first thing that comes to my mind when we're talking about courses is information is cheap and results are expensive. Mm-hmm. So if all you're doing is just informing people about things in your course, they can probably find that for free somewhere else. And I think in a lot of ways, the heyday of the $9.99 course or the $2.99 course or the $99 course that does this thing, I think we're starting to move past that. It was great in the mid 2000s and the late 2010s. Now we're getting more into almost like a boutique and bespoke kind of work where people want their person. They want their, I hate to use the word guru, but they want their specialist. They want someone who's really, really good at something to be in their corner for that thing that is a challenge for them. And a couple ways that you can use courses. So one of the things that you mentioned, you can kind of use it as a part of your onboarding or as a value add, or, as a reason to say, hey, cool, you're getting this, $1,000 value that's just included, right? It's another thing that you can put as part of a package. Okay. And so especially for B2B type businesses, that can be really powerful, right? Because now we're going to roll out this course to your 500 employees, right? Like that can be a huge value add for everyone to go through that shared experience together. Now, the flip side of that, right? Maybe that's B2B side. Business to consumer side, I think, is becoming significantly more challenging. And it can still be of value. A lot of that depends on probably your email list and your following on social media. If those are strong and you've got good engagement, good metrics, and people actually buy from you through those mediums, then a course can be a great way to maybe not make all your income, but can definitely be a great supplement to what you do. A lot of times, especially we work with a lot of coaches, consultants, people that run a business around a certain idea, and they leverage that to go in and help people with something. And what really is important is that distinguishing factor is, why should I buy your course? Or why should I get your book? Why should I invest in you to solve my problem? And it circles back to the start of our conversation, which was intellectual property, which is, what is it that makes you different? Why are you special? Why is your framework better than anybody else's? What's the proof? And all that comes down to, okay, what's the framework, right? Is it something I can grasp? Does it make sense? Is it logical? But is it unique? Is it a little bit special? It's got its own flair to it. And then the other side of that is Does he actually get results? And do you have proof of that? Can you tell some stories about that? Have you experienced it in your life? Have you had clients or other people that have walked through that and gone through that themselves? So I'll tell a quick story. So we work with a guy named Greg Hagel. Fantastic entrepreneur. He's a consultant, and he'll go in and he'll work with companies, particularly around culture.
Mm-hmm.
And he was initially in corporate America, just kind of climbing the ladder, going up the hierarchy, transitioned to being a consultant. And part of that was, okay, I want to distinguish myself. I want to be a little bit different. I got to have my thing. I got to figure out what my thing is. And I think he came out with a book on his own, and then eventually came to us for his next book. And so we helped him with a book called The 4 Dimensions of Culture. And great book, well received. And then the next thing he did is, cool, now I've got my book. Now let's build the course. Okay. Or now let's build the next piece of intellectual property off of that last piece. Mm-hmm. And so what I want to encourage people to think of as, don't think of your course or your book or your framework. That's not the end step. Mm-hmm. There's always another way to monetize and sell what makes you distinct and special. And so my encouragement is, courses can be helpful where they're useful. Yeah. But don't get caught up trying to only sell your course or only sell a book or only sell consulting. Try and do maybe many of those things and kind of have different options available for those that want it. Because just like you said, some people don't learn well through courses. Yeah. Yeah. For me, I can't say that I've participated in an online course in a couple years, just because I know for me, once I get it, I don't use it. I know that about myself. And so what I do instead is I try to attend live events, or I try to go to live seminars or something like that, where I'm more likely to attend and actually apply something. Yeah. So just know your customers and try and keep developing your intellectual property.
Yeah, that's real solid advice. There's one regret that I have from doing my book. So I wrote my book and launched it in June of 2019. And I put the cart before the horse. I really did. I didn't have a coaching or consulting package or company in place to capture leads and sell anything, but I knew that was coming. And me being the marketer that I am, I put a lot of the resources and back end shit in place so I could capture that stuff. So, okay, I'm not ready now, but I know I will be in 6 months or a year. The regret that I do have is, and this will happen with the next one, because I've got more books than me, and I just know I do. The next time I do this, I'm going to do the course simultaneously as I'm writing the book. And it's like, well, shit. I mean, for those who don't understand what the book writing process is, because there's a lot of ways to do it, right? There's 100 ways to skin a cat. One of my favorite things to do, and I've done this with a couple of editors that I've worked with over the last couple of years. And my significant other happens to be one, which is an awesome little cheat code I got in my back pocket. But we'll get on a Zoom call, right? Or a StreamYard like this, like we're using today. And it's like, hey, just interview me. Ask me some questions. If you ask me questions, I can talk all fucking day long without stopping or taking a pause, right? And this interview style really helps me answer these questions directly. And yeah, I may go off track here and there, but that person helps wrangle you back in. From there, if you're doing this with the Zoom recording, you can take that content and turn that into aspects of the course, right? You can also take that content and send it out for transcription. And now you've got a very rough transcription for chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, or the entire book. And now it's like, hey, Mr. or Mrs. Edit or editing team, here's something that's really rough, and you've got to go work your magic on it. So I see a lot of people working really, 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 really hard, creating the same content multiple times. And I truly don't think that you have to all the time. There are certain instances where you're going to have to, but at the end of the day, like, with the software, the tools, the technology that's out nowadays, it's so much easier to go ahead and repurpose content multiple times, multiple platforms, multiple formats. So if you're not doing that, if you're not thinking ahead with that in mind, I would say to the people who are listening to this, go ahead and start thinking with that kind of mindset, because you're going to save yourself time, effort, energy, and resources. What's your perspective on that?
Oh my goodness. And just like you said, there's so many ways that you can write a book or create content for a book. And that's one of the ways that we use at Story Builders is we'll literally just ask questions. We'll just get on a call. We got our little recorder in there. So it's going to, build a transcript post call, and we'll just start asking questions. And in the moment, my biggest challenge is I'm hyper focused on the person. And I was the worst in school at taking notes. Like I'd get into class, I'd write the date at the top, and the lecture would start, and then the end of class comes around. I'm like, oh crap, I didn't write anything down, right? Because I was just so focused. I was so invested in what's going on. And I think that's a very, very powerful way to capture content. A couple other ways people can do it. So one, like you mentioned, have someone quiz you or ask you questions about it. Two is you can create content in the sense of, let's maybe say I'm going to give a series of seminars. Okay. And these series of seminars, each of them is a chapter in the book, right? Yeah. Cool. I'm going to give, this 3-month series, and each week I'm going to come out with a different seminar. I'm going to record the seminar. That transcript now becomes the fodder for chapter 1. I've had to do the research. I've had to find the right stories. I've had to find good ways to bridge things and bring the audience along to an end result. Okay. Great. Another great way to do it is in a sense, put that pressure on yourself, because now there's people that are going to show up for the event, even if it's 2 or 3 people that are showing up to a live event or something, or a virtual event. Okay. It still puts that pressure on you to actually get it done. Yeah. So anything you can do that can add that little outside pressure can be extremely valuable. Other people, they're the keyboard warriors. They can just sit down and they can just clang, 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 right? They'll just bang out thousands of words. And some people are great at that. I did that for my first book. I ended up running into some challenges midway through, and a lot of it was I needed that back and forth. I needed some dialogue with someone. I needed a coach to come in and say like, oh, what are you doing here? What are you thinking? And my end challenge was I wasn't specific about who I was serving with the book, which is actually exactly the same challenge that the client I just mentioned earlier was having. She wasn't 100% on who she was serving. And when you get stuck on something like that, you don't know how to write, or you don't know how to speak, because it's always important to frame your message. Because I can talk about intellectual property, but if I'm talking to someone who's not a business owner, I'm probably going to talk about it differently, right? Whereas here we're talking to people that likely have a business, or they're in business in some way, and they've got their own skill set and stuff that makes them unique. So talking about it for them is very easy. I know how to share about that. And so I would say that's probably a third way. And then fourth way might just be recording it as you can. So get some sort of app on your phone and just kind of talk it out as you have a story come to mind, or as you have something else, just talk out some section of it, get that transcript, and then use it. So probably, 4 different ways you can use, and there's a whole bunch more.
Yeah, sure. So the fourth option you gave there was how I did my first book. And definitely a solid way. So this is the process, and maybe you guys do it similar, right? So found the editor, hired the editor, started working with them. Okay, what are we going to talk about? Cool. Yes, there's something there. Thank you for not lying to me and telling me there was something there when it wasn't. And we sat down and we had a call. It must have been a 2 or 3 hour call, like just brain dumping and having this conversation. And actually, I'm sorry, it was 3 calls. They were about an hour long each. On this final call, came back to me and she's like, "Here you go. Here's the outline." And it was shared in a Google Doc, and I had it live on one of my monitors. I'm one of the nerds who runs multiple screens here, right? So as we're having this call, I see her typing like a banshee. Like, oh my God, I don't know how this woman types that fast. Because I can't do that shit. I'm a hunt and peck guy, right? So at the end of this third call, here's this outline, and it's okay. These are your chapters, chapter 1 through either 12 or 13. This is what this chapter is about. These are the 3 to 5 key points you must hit in each of these chapters. Here's your outline. Get to work, and don't basically come back to me when you got this thing recorded and transcribed. Okay, cool. Like, that gave me enough direction where I understood what I needed to do. Now, did I reach back out and say, "Hey, I need help because I'm stuck"? Yeah, I did that a lot. But this was enough guidance, enough coaching, enough mentoring to give someone like me, very similar to you, a hard charging, a driven human who has ambitions. Okay, cool. I see the process here. And if I can see and my brain can understand the process, cool. I'm bought in, and let's move forward. And at the time, I mean, there's cheaper ways to do it now. There's like You got Firefly's AI, you got all these different tools that will come into Zoom recordings and give you a transcript for free, right? Yes, they're paid tools, but they don't cost a lot of money in order to operate or use them. At the time, I used rev.com app on my phone, and I literally walked around my house. I did it late at night after the wife and the kids went to bed, just walked around my home office with my hand on my phone. I probably had a beer in the other hand. I quit drinking a while ago, but the beer was what was giving me the energy and I thought clarity, but that's a whole other topic and story. And I just walked around my home office until the wee hours in the morning, recording chapter after chapter after chapter. And I never went back in and scrubbed or edited them. They were super, super raw. And I basically compiled all of these chapters, all the recordings, into one massive Google Doc and said, here you go, editing team. Now let's get to work. And dude, it was several weeks before they got back to me. I was like checking in, like, you guys alive? You good? And they're like, we're heads down doing this shit. And, you know, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 weeks later, we get back on a call and they're like, all right, like we've got some stuff. We have a lot of work to do still, but this is starting to turn into something. And, you know, as a person who had never been involved in the writing process at this level, I was terrified. So I'm like, man, I spent a lot of money to do this. What I gave was so raw that I don't know if other people were to listen to it, if they could comprehend what I'm trying to say. And my point here is you've got to trust the process of the professionals that you've hired to help you with this project. And that doesn't just apply here for books or courses or whatever it is that you and I do to help serve people. That applies to other specialties and areas too, in my opinion. So trust the process. And at the end of the day, the bottom line is you still got to do the fucking work. There's no way around that whatsoever.
100%. And I love how you kind of shared the story of kind of how you captured all that. Mm-hmm. And then the multiple steps after that. Because a lot of times people are like, oh, good, I got all that content out. Now they can go off, just go work their magic. And I have a book that comes out the end of it. Not quite. And even if you're paying top dollar or paying an extra amount to have more of that done by somebody else, they're still going to keep coming back to you for more because there's just going to be these little gaps, or they need one more anecdote, or they're like, this framework needs a little bit of work. Tell me about this. And really at the end of the day, it is going to be your name that's on that book. And so you want that book to be a good representation of you. And I think once people get started with a book, they start to understand how much goes into a book, which is why a book still has so much prestige around it. Because, man, it does take a lot of work to get that from an idea in your brain to this physical thing that you can now hold in your hand. There's a lot that goes into it. And I'll share this little piece. Is good writing is rewriting. That's an Ernest Hemingway quote. And just know that whether you're going to be a keyboard warrior with it, whether you're going to speak it out, whether you're getting interviewed with it, the best thing that can happen is for pieces of it to get redone and rewritten or refocused or changed. And often you're only going to get 20% of it's going to be good that comes out for your first draft. And you need to just keep iterating with that a little bit until you get it to that 80, 90, closer to 100% of what it's supposed to be before you head into the really, really final finishing touches.
Yep, dude, I love it. I love it. I'll tell you this: over the whole, I don't know what your experience here is with this, but my experience. Okay, the book writing project has multiple phases. There's multiple things that have to get done. You know, from obviously writing the content, editing the content, cover artwork, front cover, back cover, spine. Like, it's not just the cover. There's multiple aspects of the cover. And for me, the editing team said, hey, you've got to write the about you for the back cover. And I was like, terrified. And still to this day, one of the most difficult things that I've had to do was write about me. And I think that this is a commonality between a lot of people because, you know, it's like, all right, well, yeah, I know deep down inside that I've had some pretty cool life experiences and I've done some shit in this time here. But at the same point in time, you don't want to come off as this cocky asshole that's talking about yourself in this manner that is required, you know, in this about us section on the back cover of most books. So tell me, what was your experience with this? And do you find that you have other authors that you work with who have had the same struggle?
I think extremely common struggle, especially for people that consider humbleness as a part of their personality. So very similar to you. I've been humbled many times in my life, and I like to carry myself in at least as humble a manner as I can,
Yeah.
because but there's a difference between being humble and being aware.
Mm.
And I feel like some people get those blurred. And I'll challenge people that are listening with this idea. When someone compliments you on something, what's your typical response? And a lot of times when someone compliments you, people downplay it, or they say
Yep.
something bad about the thing. Oh, I love your coat. Thanks. I got it at a thrift store.
Yeah.
Like, oh, okay. Instead of just saying, oh, thank you. I appreciate that. And so that may be a sign that, you have this kind of, maybe not fake humbleness, but a humbleness that's lacking awareness.
Yep.
And so for what we want for a back cover, that requires awareness. You need to push out of kind of that humbleness without awareness, and you need to move into, actually, you know what? I am pretty good at this because I'm writing the dang book about it, and here's actually why I matter. And here's why what I have to say is important. And a couple of things you guys can do if you're struggling with that kind of about me section is break it down into a simple formula. Usually it's going to be 1 or 2 sentences at the start, kind of listing out why you're special, what makes you different. Do you have some sort of special certification? Have you gotten special awards? Have you created a business that's done something different or special in comparison to other businesses like yours, right? Just give us a little bit of that special sauce, because if that's not there, it's going to be tougher to convince people. So I guarantee you, if you're writing a book or you're at that stage where you need an about the author section, you've done enough to distinguish yourself. Just find those few things. It doesn't need to be anything extraordinary, but a few things that are accolades. Then you're going to want to connect with them and say, make it clear that you understand their problems, the reader, and make sure you're connecting with them. So, and he's worked with hundreds of other people to grow their businesses or whatever, right? Make it clear that you know them and they can trust you. And then a lot of times there'll be like a last line that's maybe humorous or connects back to your family or gives a little bit of that personal touch to it. So for those that are just really struggling, just break it down into a formula. Call it the brag lines at the top, and then call it connecting with the audience in the middle, and then a little bit about me on the personal side at the bottom. And that's a really simple way to do an about the author section.
Yeah, that's great, solid advice. I've got a final question here before we kind of wrap things up today. And it's going to encompass intellectual property, not just books, but it could be courses, could be copywriting, could be presentations. Look, unless you're living under a rock, you haven't been in front of or used, or you're not aware of AI at this point. Okay, and ChatGPT being the most common, and there's thousands of other options out there today, folks. Thousands. What are you guys seeing in your space with authors who are like, oh, now this is going to be so much easier, so now I'm going to do it, and they want to leverage AI to write the book for them? I know what I see, but I want to hear it from the horse's mouth, someone who's in this space day in and day out. What are you seeing with this? And are you guys even entertaining potential authors who are coming to you who want to leverage AI to write the book for them?
Yeah, so I'll say this. If you're using AI to write 100% of your book, it is not going to be a very good book. Now, maybe 10 years in the future, maybe it will be better than anything that mankind can currently write.
Yes.
That's very possible. Where we're at now, that is not the reality. So I want to start there. And then on the business side, usually the people that we're working with, they're aware and they like to leverage tools, but they don't obsess about the tool. They obsess about the result. And so what they'll do is they'll pick up the tool and they'll use the tool where it's appropriate. And then they'll move on to get the result that they're after. So there's plenty of people that use the ChatGPTs, the Claude AIs, all the other ones that are out there to get the results that they're after. But I would say for the most part, if you want your book to actually resonate and connect with people, it needs that human touch. It needs human stories. It needs your experience. It needs your special sauce. your intellectual property. What is it that makes you, your business, your brand, your service, the way you interact? What makes you different? And that's really what needs to show through in your book. And it's very difficult to pull those things out using AI or using some of those tools. So I use AI probably not on a daily basis. Now maybe incorporated into some of the other things that are behind the hood. But as far as like going to a large language model or doing stuff like that, maybe once a week, I'll be dabbling in that. And usually I'm using that for brainstorming or pulling a list or pulling some quotes from a book that we want to use. Or because, if I had to go through and flip through a book through 300 pages, try and find a couple good quotes, like that's kind of hard to do. Or I can drop that manuscript into something that can just kind of parse through it, and I can give it some direction and a good prompt on how to find quotes. It could pop out 20 quotes and I can pull the 3 that I actually need that are going to be useful for what I want to do. And that task now took me 10 minutes instead of 2 or 3 hours.
Yeah,
exactly.
I love that. And I think that's really valid, solid information. I started this writing thing like you before AI was a thing. And I'm really glad I did, because it taught me what is required in order to become a good writer. At the same point in time, like, hey, I'm all about shaving some time and becoming more efficient. Right? A lot of what I do with the coaching consulting is on the operations side, is to make a company that's already doing good in business better by making them more efficient. Right? So, okay, what kind of tools can we implement? What kind of systems and processes can we implement? And, AI falls under tools and systems and processes. I leverage it, and I'd say pretty close to daily at this point. Some days more than others. And, like you, I could probably go a week or 2 here or there and not touch it. And then all of a sudden I'm touching it for 5 days straight. But it's a tool. I've taken the time to understand and learn how to write prompts. So at this point in time, it knows me, it knows my business, it knows that I'm an author, it knows my writing style. And I've taken hours of my life and uploaded documents that I wrote manually by hand the old school way and edited the old school way to program the system so it can write more like me. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. But like you said, it gives me the framework I need. Like one of the best use cases that I found that I'm leveraging right now, literally, like before we got on this call, I was deep working in it. Okay. I've got a small in-person meetup that we're doing here in the DFW area, and it's going to be September 26th, right? And I've got room for 20 people, but I have to put together a landing page and a sign-up page for this. And the audience that I'm going after is a new group of people who really doesn't know who I am. So, all right, well, some of them do, but at this point in time, it's like, okay, let me go into ChatGPT and say, hey, this is what I'm doing. This is what I need help with. What information do you need from me to best craft this prompt, the whole 9 yards? And then boom, back and forth a couple of times. And I don't know, maybe, see, people think you're going to write this one quick little prompt and ChatGPT's going to kick out this magical piece of fairy dust. And it doesn't work that way. Like,
it's a conversation. It literally becomes a conversation. You go back and forth.
Yeah. So, for me to get the information and the framework that I needed out of the system, it was probably a good solid 45 minutes to an hour of conversation back and forth with ChatGPT to craft the structure, the outline, and the sections of the landing page, and then to create the copy that's going to fill into the spaces in each of those sections. And once again, the copy isn't perfect, but it gives me framework that I can then go and massage and turn into my voice and my words.
Yes. And I know for me, I like to think of AI or large language models. They're going to get you 60% of the way there, maybe 70 or even 80% of the way there, depending on what you're doing. But it needs you at the end. It needs you to land the plane, right? So if you are utilizing these things, absolutely, they can be a huge time saver. Just make sure that you go through it or read it, because there's going to be certain words that get overused or certain analogies that are overdone. And it's just, I can read articles now and I'm like, this was just entirely written using AI. Like there was no person that looked at this. And it's becoming more and more obvious when that is happening. People, it's almost like spam emails, right? Is early on in the internet era in the early 2000s, it was hard to know what was spammy and what wasn't. Now we've all got our spam radar way up. We know what garbage emails look like. And the same thing is going to be true in the next years as people get used to AI in this landscape. People are going to smell an AI touch in your stuff. And so if you're spending too much or too invested in AI for the completion of your things, it's not going to be a win in the end for you. So make sure that if you are utilizing it, make sure you sprinkle as much of yourself in at the end as possible.
Yeah, I like it. Sprinkle yourself in. Andrew, man, this has been awesome. I thoroughly enjoy our conversations. I truly think that you and I are cut from the same cloth in some area of life, and it's cool, man. It's cool hearing your perspective. Your energy always shines through, even though we're doing this virtually. And I hope that the listeners can pick up on that and just understand how truly passionate and caring you are, because it's ridiculously clear to me. So thank you for coming here. Thank you for sharing a bit of your story, some of your knowledge, your insights. As everyone in the podcast realm does, I'm going to ask you the age-old question, but where can we find you, sir?
Sure. Find me on LinkedIn, linkedin.com/whatever. And then my handle is Andrew J. Biernat. So that's Biernat. And you can find me on LinkedIn. I post a lot of content there, especially podcast related. And you can go to our website, mystorybuilders.com, to find out more about us.
Cool. Love it, man. Appreciate you coming in here today. And I look forward to staying connected.
Same here, brother. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for tuning in to the Step It Up Entrepreneur Podcast. Make sure you head over to stepitupentrepreneur.com and make sure you subscribe so you never miss an episode of the Step It Up Entrepreneur Podcast.